excited that he's back in Toronto, and now you have this news. So I'm not a fan of it.
On July 9th, the trade has not been finalized, as Sham said.
Creator-friendly, expressive TTS narration for storytelling.
Use clear diction, moderate pacing, gentle pauses for key events, light breath sounds, and subtle intonation changes, suitable for short stories or bedtime tales, lasting 20-30 seconds.
First and foremost, I appreciate him being here. That's my guy. I mean, he's a special person. He's a special basketball player, and I appreciate him even coming just to be here and support him.
Kawhi Leonard returned to Toronto to a hero's welcome following reports of his trade back to the Raptors. Soon after, the NBA informed Toronto that any deal would also require accepting whatever penalties emerge from the ongoing investigation.
Teams will not be moving forward unless the Raptors assume the risk of potential outcomes that come from that investigation.
The NBA made it clear, no trade will proceed unless the Raptors accept full responsibility for any penalties resulting from the investigation.
Now that the Raptors and Clippers were set to finalize this deal, the NBA has essentially paused that conversation until the end of their investigation.
The NBA has found itself in one of the most unusual situations in recent memory. Instead of being finalized or cancelled, the reported Kawhi Leonard trade has been placed on hold. While both organizations are believed to support the deal,
it cannot move forward until an ongoing league investigation reaches a conclusion. As things stand, Kawhi Leonard officially remains a member of the Los Angeles Clippers. While the players involved on Toronto's side have not changed teams, the trade is essentially paused because the NBA wants complete clarity before approving any transaction tied to the investigation. League officials reportedly informed the Raptors
that the deal cannot be completed unless they are willing to accept any
consequences that could arise from the final ruling. This unexpected delay has created uncertainty across the league,
leaving fans, analysts, and executives waiting for answers. A move that once appeared close to completion is now dependent on legal reviews and the NBA's final decision,
making it one of the most talked about stories of the offseason. According to reports from NBA insider Shams Charania, the Clippers-Raptors deal involving Kawhi Leonard will remain frozen until the investigation officially concludes. That means no players will change teams, no paperwork will be finalized, and no announcements will be made until the league gives its approval. For now, everyone involved is in a holding pattern. Both franchises, the players, and fans must wait for the investigation's outcome before the trade can move forward. Until then, Kawhi Leonard remains with the Clippers, and one of the biggest stories of the NBA offseason continues to generate speculation across the basketball world.
I had no control over this company. I owned less than 3% of the company. I had no board seat. I had no control. It's possible nobody had any control.
The reported blockbuster trade between the Los Angeles Clippers and the Toronto Raptors has taken another dramatic turn, and the latest developments explain why the deal remains on hold. According to the Clippers, the two franchises reached an agreement in principle on June 30, but completing the trade is no longer entirely in their hands. The NBA has informed both teams that the transaction cannot be finalized until its investigation reaches a conclusion. More importantly, the league reportedly told Toronto that completing the trade would require the Raptors to accept any potential consequences tied specifically to Kawhi Leonard's contract. That wording immediately caught the attention of league insiders, because it focuses on the player's contract rather than general penalties against the Clippers organization. Toronto's response was cautious. Reports indicated that the Raptors are willing to wait for the investigation to finish before moving forward. From a business perspective, that decision makes perfect sense. While Toronto remains interested in acquiring Leonard, no front office wants to inherit uncertainty surrounding one of the biggest trades of the offseason. Until the investigation ends, the franchise appears content to let the process play out instead of rushing into an agreement carrying unknown legal and financial risks. As a result, nothing has officially changed. Kawhi Leonard remains a member of the Los Angeles Clippers, while Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick are still with the Raptors, even though both teams reportedly agreed to the framework of the deal days ago. The NBA has effectively pressed the pause button until every question surrounding the investigation has been answered. The value involved in the proposed trade makes the delay even more significant. According to reports, Toronto is prepared to part with Brandon Ingram, young guard Grady Dick, multiple first-round draft selections, additional second-round picks, and future pick swap rights. Those assets represent years of roster building and long-term planning. Some of the reported first-round selections are unprotected, meaning Toronto would surrender those picks regardless of where they land in the draft. Whether the Raptors become contenders or struggle in future seasons, those selections would still belong to the Clippers. That enormous price tag explains why Toronto is taking a patient approach. No organization would willingly complete a trade involving so many valuable assets without first understanding every possible outcome tied to the player being acquired. The biggest question surrounding the investigation is the range of penalties the NBA could impose if violations are found. While many fans immediately assume financial fines are the only realistic consequence, the league's collective bargaining agreement provides commissioners with several disciplinary options. Depending on the severity of any violation, potential penalties could include substantial financial fines, the loss of future draft picks, suspensions for team personnel, or other disciplinary actions permitted under league rules. In especially serious situations involving improper contract arrangements, the NBA also has the authority to take additional steps if evidence supports those findings. Because the investigation has not concluded, no final determination has been announced, and the league has not publicly stated what penalties, if any, will ultimately apply. That uncertainty is exactly why the Raptors appear unwilling to finalize the transaction today. Until the NBA delivers its decision, they cannot accurately evaluate the true value or risk of completing the trade. History shows that the NBA has taken salary cap investigations seriously in the past. One of the league's most well-known cases involved Joe Smith and the Minnesota Timberwolves in the early 2000s. League officials determined that an undisclosed contract arrangement violated NBA rules, leading to severe organizational penalties, including significant draft pick losses and financial punishment. The case has often been cited as an example of how aggressively the NBA can respond when it believes competitive rules have been broken. Because of that precedent, many observers believe the league is carefully reviewing every piece of evidence before allowing the Kawhi Leonard trade to proceed. The investigation reportedly includes months of document reviews, interviews, and cooperation from those involved. Until that process is complete, neither team can move forward with confidence. The Clippers, meanwhile, continue to deny any wrongdoing. The organization has stated that it fully cooperated with the NBA throughout the investigation and maintains that it did not violate league rules. Reports also note that the franchise believes it was itself affected by the alleged misconduct connected to businessman Joe Sandberg, who was later convicted in a separate federal fraud case unrelated to any NBA ruling. Clippers owner Steve Ballmer has also publicly stated that his involvement with the investment firm connected to the investigation was limited and that he held neither operational control nor a governing role. For now, every aspect of this blockbuster deal remains in limbo. Both franchises reportedly still want the trade to happen, but the NBA's investigation must reach its conclusion before any paperwork becomes official. Until then, Kawhi Leonard remains with the Clippers. Toronto keeps its players and draft assets. And one of the biggest stories of the NBA offseason continues to leave fans waiting for the league's final decision.
By the way, we also have a deal, a $28 million organic marketing sponsorship deal with Kawhi that was to circumvent the salary cap, LOL.
If the Clippers' explanation is accurate, the allegations lose credibility. However, reporter Pablo Torre obtained a document allegedly showing a $28 million agreement tied to Kawhi Leonard's time with the Clippers. A former Aspiration employee also claimed the arrangement was designed to bypass the NBA's salary cap, further fueling the controversy.
There is a fascinating backstory to this Kawhi Leonard trade to the Raptors that just happened, because in 2019, the Toronto Raptors owners met with Uncle Dennis Robertson. And Uncle Dennis, according to the Toronto Star, quote, asked for ownership stakes in outside companies. As one source put it, when told about all the corporate sponsors in Toronto who would be happy to have Leonard as a pitchman, Leonard's camp said, "We don't want to do anything." The Raptors then proceeded to take these demands from Uncle Dennis to the league office and Adam Silver. But when the league investigated, they found nothing worth punishing, and so Kawhi became a Clipper, and the Toronto Raptors, crucially, became the most aggrieved party in this entire saga because they believed that they lost Kawhi Leonard because they refused to break the rules.
The controversy surrounding Kawhi Leonard continues to grow as more attention shifts to the people involved behind the scenes. At the center of the debate is a simple but significant allegation: whether there was an unauthorized agreement connected to Leonard's contract. During an appearance on Pablo Torre's podcast in 2025, former NBA owner Mark Cuban defended Steve Ballmer, saying he believed Ballmer was too experienced and intelligent to knowingly violate league rules. However, Cuban also acknowledged that if the reported allegations proved true and Ballmer had prior knowledge, the situation could become even more serious than the infamous Joe Smith salary cap case. NBA rules require evidence involving both the team and the player or someone officially acting on the player's behalf before the league can take its most severe actions regarding a contract. That has brought renewed attention to Leonard's longtime advisor, Uncle Dennis Robertson, who has represented Kawhi's interests throughout much of his career. Interestingly, reports indicate that Leonard recently changed his representation by hiring Harrison Gaines of /Sports to handle his contract negotiations with Toronto. The move marked a major shift after years of relying on Uncle Dennis and longtime advisor Mitch Frankel. Because both Leonard and Uncle Dennis have reportedly been interviewed during the NBA's investigation, many observers believe their roles could become an important part of the league's final decision.
What's so fascinating is that the investigation has not resolved before the Clippers and the Raptors agreed on this trade, turning the Raptors from the most aggrieved party into the one and only bidder being seriously considered by both the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard for the services of Kawhi Leonard, which raises a follow-up question of how convenient this now is for the NBA, which is trying to shrink the PR problem of this scandal. The Raptors now employ the superstar they might have been calling for punishment.
The roots of the current Kawhi Leonard controversy reportedly trace back to the summer of 2019, when Leonard entered free agency after leading the Toronto Raptors to an NBA championship. At the time, Toronto was determined to keep its superstar, but reports suggested that the negotiations became far more complicated than a standard contract discussion. According to reporting from Bruce Arthur, representatives connected to Leonard allegedly presented a list of requests that extended well beyond a typical NBA contract. Those reported demands included an ownership stake in Maple Leaf Sports and entertainment-related assets, interests in outside business ventures, and millions of dollars in additional sponsorship opportunities. Toronto reportedly rejected several of those requests, believing they crossed the line of what NBA rules allow. Teams are permitted to introduce players to corporate sponsors, but league rules prohibit franchises from negotiating endorsement agreements on a player's behalf. Reports claim the Raptors instead offered to connect Leonard with companies interested in legitimate marketing partnerships that would require promotional work, such as commercials, public appearances, and advertising campaigns. According to those same reports, that proposal was rejected because the expectation was allegedly compensation without traditional endorsement obligations. It is important to note that these allegations have never been proven, and no official finding has concluded that any NBA rules were violated. The controversy intensified years later when Leonard reportedly signed a lucrative endorsement agreement worth approximately $28 million with Aspiration, a financial technology company that later entered bankruptcy proceedings. Reports have claimed the agreement required little or no promotional work, becoming one of the central issues examined during the NBA's ongoing investigation. Those claims remain disputed, and the league has not publicly announced any final conclusions. Leonard has previously stated that he had no knowledge of the alleged requests made during the 2019 free agency process. In addition, NBA reporter Sam Amick has reported that the league previously reviewed complaints related to that period and did not find evidence showing that the Clippers granted the reported requests. At this stage, no official ruling has established wrongdoing by either Leonard or the Clippers. Another development that has attracted attention is Leonard's recent decision to change representation. For much of his career, contract negotiations were handled by his longtime advisor, Uncle Dennis Robertson, along with trusted representatives. However, Leonard recently hired Harrison Gaines of /Sports to oversee his negotiations. While changing agents is common in professional sports and does not imply guilt or innocence, the timing has generated significant discussion because Uncle Dennis has reportedly been interviewed as part of the NBA's investigation. Many analysts believe the NBA's decision to pause the reported Clippers-Raptors trade reflects the league's desire to resolve every unanswered question before approving any transaction involving Leonard. Ironically, the Raptors, who reportedly declined the disputed requests during Leonard's 2019 free agency, are now being asked to accept the potential risks tied to acquiring him. For now, the investigation remains ongoing, and no conclusions have been reached. Until the NBA announces its findings, speculation will continue, but the ultimate outcome remains uncertain for both Kawhi Leonard and the teams involved.
And how interesting is it that the chairman of the NBA's Board of Governors happens to be Larry Tannenbaum, the owner of the Raptors?
He then raised a question that made the entire situation seem suspicious.
The expectation around all sides is that this deal will end up happening at the end of the day, Han.
There are several theories about why the NBA's investigation has taken so long, but not everyone agrees on the reason. Some observers have questioned whether leadership changes within the league could be affecting the timeline. While Mel's chairman Larry Tannenbaum has served as chairman of the NBA Board of Governors, he is also preparing to step down from both positions following Rodgers' acquisition of full control of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Because his departure is approaching, some analysts argue it makes little sense to believe the investigation is being delayed simply to benefit someone who is already leaving. A more straightforward explanation may be that the investigation has become far more complex than originally expected. After months of interviews, document reviews, and legal analysis, the league may simply be taking extra time to ensure it reaches the correct decision before approving any transaction connected to Kawhi Leonard. The delay has created major consequences for everyone involved. Leonard is entering the final year of his current contract, which is worth more than $50 million. According to salary cap expert Bobby Marks, he would be eligible to negotiate a lucrative extension with his new team once the trade becomes official. However, because the transaction remains incomplete, those extension talks cannot legally begin. The Raptors also face difficult roster decisions while waiting for the investigation to conclude. The proposed trade would significantly affect Toronto's salary cap situation, limiting the team's financial flexibility under the NBA's collective bargaining rules. Additional contract incentives involving players already on the roster further complicate those calculations, making it difficult for the front office to finalize future moves until the trade status is resolved. Beyond the financial impact, the uncertainty affects players as well. Toronto cannot fully move forward with its offseason planning, while key members of the reported trade package remain in limbo. Coaches, executives, and players are all waiting for clarity before preparing for the upcoming season. Despite the uncertainty, there is still optimism around the league that the trade will eventually be completed. NBA insider Shams Charania has reported that people involved continue to expect the deal to move forward once the investigation officially concludes. Until the NBA releases its final decision, however, both franchises remain in a holding pattern, with one of the offseason's biggest trades still awaiting approval.
Although Shams has also reported that the expectation across all sides is that the deal eventually gets done.
Although nothing has been finalized, most league insiders still expect Kawhi Leonard to eventually end up with the Toronto Raptors. The biggest question is no longer if the trade happens, but when. With the NBA's investigation still ongoing, the process could continue for weeks or even months before a final decision is reached. At this stage, nobody outside the league truly knows whether the allegations against the Clippers have any merit. After nearly 10 months of interviews, legal reviews, and thousands of documents, the NBA has yet to issue an official ruling. Despite that, Everyone connected to the trade is already feeling the impact. Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick remain in limbo, uncertain about where they'll begin the season or what their immediate future looks like. Kawhi Leonard, now 35 years old, is watching valuable time disappear while his next contract situation remains unresolved. The Clippers are unable to move forward with their long-term plans, while Toronto is being asked to accept significant uncertainty before completing the deal. Perhaps the most frustrating part is that none of the teams or players involved have been formally found guilty of violating league rules. Yet, the delay itself has created major consequences for every side. If the Clippers are ultimately cleared, months of uncertainty will have stalled a superstar's career for no reason. If violations are eventually confirmed, then the prolonged investigation has already shifted the burden onto innocent players and organizations. Either way, the NBA faces growing criticism, and fans are left waiting for answers that still haven't arrived.